Welcome to the 21st century in this video visit. I'm here in Auburn, New York today, and behind me is City Hall, where I presided as mayor for 4 years. And I began my term as mayor on the very first day of the 21st century. Today we're going to visit 2 sites that celebrate women. We're going to Seneca Falls to the National Women's Hall of Fame, but first we're here in Auburn at the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center.
Welcome to the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center, where we focus on the brave New York State women and men who fought progressively for social justice reform. From the 1700s to modern day, you'll meet New Yorkers who fought bravely for women's rights, abolition of slavery, and human rights. The building was designed by architects based in Brooklyn. The building was opened in November 2018, and it was part of the 11 welcome centers that the governor built throughout the state. We have these beautiful large windows that frame our historic sites, like City Hall and William and Frances Seward's house, like big, beautiful portraits. So here we have a special focus on equal rights due to our proximity in central New York, next door to Frances and William Seward's home. And of course, down the street is Harriet Tubman's home. And also a bit down the way is Seneca Falls, where you have the Women's Rights National Historical Park and Women's National Hall of Fame.
I'm Amanda Morgan, a principal and architect, and I was the project manager and architect for the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center in Auburn. The exhibition was grouped by media rather than by equal rights movement, and it was designed to be organized into areas of large portraits of key figures, posters of key movements, images from marches and organizing events, and key excerpts from speeches.
So here's where you'll meet the movers and the shakers of the women's rights movement. Let's meet a few of those. This is Matilda Jocelyn Gage, and Matilda is important because she was the president of the National Women's Suffrage Association, and she was a defender of the rights of indigenous people. Meet Martha Coffin Wright. Martha Coffin Wright, along with her sister Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, started the first women's rights convention in Seneca Falls. She was good friends with Harriet Tubman and is credited with introducing Harriet Tubman to Frances Seward. Sojourner Truth is another unsung suffragist. She was a proponent for women's rights equality, and she's famous for her speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" This is Bella Abzug. She was a New York congresswoman who was a founding member of the National Women's Political Caucus along with Shirley Chisholm, and she was a fierce advocate for LGBTQ rights. And a very well-known feminist of our time is Gloria Steinem. She was the co-founder of Miss Magazine. Meet Harriet Tubman, and we like to point out this portrait of her as it was the newly discovered young portrait of Harriet that was actually taken right here in Auburn. So when we talk about the beginning of the women's rights movement, we talk about Susan B. Anthony, as she was one of America's most famous fighters for women's right to vote. She was also an anti-slavery activist, and she first met Frederick Douglass at her family's farm in Rochester, and the two were frequent allies in the struggle for universal suffrage. One of the most well-known change makers when you talk about modern-day suffragists is Shirley Chisholm. Campaigning on the slogan, "Unbought and Unbossed," Chisholm, the daughter of Caribbean immigrants, became the first black woman elected to Congress in 1968. In 1972, she ran for president as a Democrat, the first black woman to seek the nomination on a major party ticket. So this is the first of one of our posters, broadsides, bills, and banners wall. And you've already met the people, but here's where you really get to see how New Yorkers organized and came together before modern technology. There are posters like the original LGBTQ pride flag. And 1917 is a historic year for women because it marks when New York State women won the right to vote. And this is 3 years prior to the passing of the 19th Amendment. You can see where women, when they didn't win the vote in 1915, they just covered up the 5 with a 7 and repurposed that. We hope this inspired you to come visit us in person and actually spend some time cozying up to the social justice table or the speech island and really interacting with some of our digital components here at the Equal Rights Heritage Center.
Hi, my name is Natalie Rudd, and I'm the Programs Manager here at the National Women's Hall of Fame. Here at the Hall, we try to start all of our visitors by asking the question, why? Why do we need a National Women's Hall of Fame? And the answer is simple. We have the mission of showcasing great women and inspiring all. In 1969, a group of women here in Seneca Falls got together because they realized that women's stories weren't being told in the history books. We were founded here in Seneca Falls, the birthplace of the women's rights movement in downtown Seneca Falls, the 1844 Seneca Knitting Mill. Two of the original owners of the mill were two of the signers of the Declaration of Sentiments, which was signed just across the canal at the Wesleyan Chapel. And over the next 5-10 years, we will be continuing to renovate and expand into this beautiful, iconic building in Seneca Falls.
I'm Mariam Yakub. I am a project manager at CJS Architects in Rochester, New York. CJS Architects was hired not only to do the restoration of the existing mill building, but also work on the addition, the expansion for this museum. The old mill building has been restored to its initial state. The history lives here, and the 21st century addition is a representation of the future of the women's movement.
Surrounding me on these scrolls are the names of our hundreds of inductees, listed by the year that they were inducted into the Hall, starting in 1973 with our first induction, all the way to our most recent induction ceremony. Here you'll see our first class of inductees. You might see some names you recognize: Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Eleanor Roosevelt, Amelia Earhart, but you might also see some names that you don't recognize. And that's the beauty of the National Women's Hall of Fame. We try to tell the stories of some of the more well-known figures of history who are known for incredible reasons, but also some women who maybe weren't known, who were left out of the history books that you might not have learned in your history classes.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Manjan, and I'm a documentary filmmaker and the creator of Unladylike 2020, a series of 26 short films that premiered on PBS American Masters in 2020 for the centennial of women's suffrage. I'm here at the National Women's Hall of Fame to honor Jeanette Rankin, who was inducted as a Woman of the Hall in 1993 for her work in government, education, and activism. Jeanette Rankin is remembered as the first woman to serve in the U.S. Congress. She represented the state of Montana twice during World War I and World War II. But beyond her service in politics, she also was instrumental to passage of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote, and was a lifelong pacifist who was involved in anti-war movements all the way into her late 80s, where she marched in 1968 in the Jeanette Rankin Brigade at an anti-Vietnam War demonstration in Washington, D.C. at age 86. So she had really paved the way. One of her famous sayings is, "I may be the first woman in Congress, but I will not be the last." Like you and me and all the women honored in this hall, Jeanette Rankin was also a human being and had her flaws. She was very much a product of her time. As a white woman, she was willing to throw black women and other women of color under the bus when it came to passing the suffrage amendment. When I was conducting my research into Jeanette Rankin, I came across a photograph from 1916 that shows the U.S. Congress at the time. She's sitting alone in the middle, surrounded by 434 men. The courage of this woman is what struck me the most. She passed away at age 92 in 1973, and about a decade after her death, a statue of her was installed in the U.S. Capitol.
Women accomplish great things every day, and we want to celebrate them here at the National Women's Hall of Fame. And how we do that is we ask you, the public, to nominate them. We are looking for women who inspire you. And one day you could be a nominee or an inductee here in the National Women's Hall of Fame, because you are our 21st century leaders.
I hope you'll make a plan to visit both the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center in Auburn and the National Women's Hall of Fame here in Seneca Falls.